The time is now for the Dr. Bob Sports Podcast. I am Tanner. I am our head of analytics, and I am in my 8th year working alongside Bob to originate our NFL and college basketball bets. And today, as always, I'm joined by our digital media specialist, Grant. We've got the best division in the NFL today. Every team with a win total of at least 8.5.
Yeah, this division's pretty loaded. I mean, looking back at last year, they went 31-13 versus all the other divisions. Just crazy. So today's episode, we're going to touch on some fantasy advice. We're going to share a future bet later in the podcast, but let's start here in Baltimore with the Ravens coming off of that 13-4 season. And they won 10 of 12 to end the season. I mean, many of these wins were beatdowns on top teams such as the Lions, the 49ers, and Dolphins. So looking back, the Ravens came into that AFC Championship game as 4.5-point favorites over the Chiefs, but they would fall short in Lamar's MVP season. So 2024, they got a win total set at 10.5, but there has been a lot of changes on this roster, most notably losing 3 starters on the offensive line.
Yeah, the pass blocking is going to get worse, swapping Kevin Zeitler for Daniel Falele, John Simpson for Andrew Voorhees, and Morgan Moses for Roger Rosengarten. But not bringing anyone in, it signals to me that they have high confidence in a guy like Andrew Voorhees, who could have been closer to the top of last year's draft before he tore his ACL at the combine. And he might be able to give the Ravens the same level they got from John Simpson, who you remember did get waived by the Raiders just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and Simpson only got $12 million for 2 years from the Jets, and I think the Ravens could have made room in the cap room if they wanted him back, and then they'll want Rosengarten to win that job at tackle since they just spent a round 2 pick on him. But if he's not ready, we know Patrick McCarry is capable.
Yeah, I mean, McCarry's gotten a ton of snaps these past few seasons because Ronnie Stanley's been hurt so much. And McCarry finished 40th in pass blocking efficiency on true snaps out of 90 qualifiers last year. So pretty solid for a backup. And if Rosengarten beats McCarry out, that signals that Rosengarten is pretty solid, right? So we're maybe not as worried about guys like Voorhees and Rosengarten if they're in the lineup. I am worried about a guy like Daniel Falele, who's likely going to be a major pass blocking downgrade from Kevin Zeitler, which will create less time in the pocket for Lamar Jackson to operate. And he's not been great in the quick game. He was 18th in yards per attempt on throws less than 2.5 seconds last year, compared to 2nd in yards per attempt on throws with over 2.5 seconds. And Lamar just really has not solved the cover zero problems, even with the new offensive coordinator. And he's been dealing with these problems since way back in 2021 in that Dolphins game versus Brian Flores, when he cover zeroed Lamar basically every snap in that game. It still was affecting Lamar in the AFC Championship in that loss to the Chiefs when they consistently sent 6 and 7 blitzers.
Yeah, that's definitely been a weakness. And do you have any ideas how the Ravens might try to fix that?
I don't. I mean, I really don't think that if they had the answer, they would have employed it right last year. I guess they've had a whole nother offseason to figure it out. But the only thing I can really think of is that Zay Flowers consistently beats one-on-one coverage early in the down just to give Lamar easy answers when he sees cover zero. But he might just end up scrambling more, bailing out of bad pockets. But the defenses that can keep Lamar in the pocket and send cover zero looks like the Chiefs did in the AFC Championship will give him problems.
Yeah, and we talked about the Eagles and Saquon Barkley a couple podcasts back, and now another analytically based front office signs a big name running back, with Baltimore bringing in Derrick Henry.
Yeah, and I do not think this offensive line is going to take a big hit in run blocking. I mean, these 3 new guys weigh over 1,000 pounds. So we could see this team's pass rate notably shift.
Yeah, and looking at the receivers here, I mean, they didn't bring anyone in after losing Odell, who was 2nd on the team in targets.
Yeah, and they'll want to get Isaiah Likely on the field more often with Mark Andrews, who they're hoping will get more than 10 games this year. So that signals they want to play a lot of 2 tight end sets. But I also think they want to play a lot of 2 running back sets, or at least, with the fullback, Patrick Ricard, because they were 0.27 EPA per dropback better with Ricard on the field last year. So, I mean, it seems like the Ravens' best personnel package is 22 with Zay Flowers as the lone receiver out there.
So, where do you think this all nets out for an offensive rating here?
Well, I mean, the Ravens last season hovered around seventh in market. The offense did. I think they're going to be helped, by going into year two with
Mhm.
Todd Monken, but that can only do so much. I'd say they're a borderline top 10 offense now with the pass blocking going from elite to mediocre. And on the other side of the ball, Baltimore's defense would have been number one in our priors if they brought everybody back.
Yeah, but they didn't bring everybody back. I mean, they lose three starters in Jadeveon Clowney, Patrick Queen, and Geno Stone, and maybe most importantly, defensive coordinator Mike McDonald is out the door.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not as worried about the Queen and Stone losses. I mean, Patrick Queen benefited tremendously from playing next to Roquan Smith, and we'll see how he is in Pittsburgh this season, playing next to average linebackers again. He certainly struggled in the first 2.5 years before the Baltimore traded for Roquan Smith. And then on the Geno Stone front, I mean, the Ravens might not have as much flexibility on the back end without Geno Stone, but they still have Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams, who signed a 5-year, $70 million deal for a reason. So I have to say that they still have one of the best safety groups in the league, even without Geno Stone.
Yeah, and they bring back Brandon Stevens and Arthur Maulet, and then Marlon Humphrey will likely be healthier, and they used first-round draft pick on Nate Wiggins, so you have to think they're going to be getting better at the cornerback position this season.
Yeah, I think they are going to be getting better production from their cornerbacks, but the pass rush is really going to suffer losing Jadeveon Clowney and Mike McDonald. So Baltimore's defense was seventh in pressure rate last year with the guys that they had. That was kind of crazy. I mean, Mike McDonald's understanding of how to deploy timely simulated pressures really helped this unit. Now, I'm not insinuating that the Ravens are going to stop using these sim pressure looks, but they'll almost certainly be less effective under first-time defensive coordinator Zach Orr. I mean, you look at it, Jadeveon Clowney, Kyle Van Noy, Odafe Owe, that edge rushing rotation combined for a 16% pressure rate. But all of Baltimore's other edge rushers had just a 5% pressure rate. And we're going to see a lot more of those guys this season with Clowney gone and Kyle Van Noy heading into his age 33 season.
So the pass rush is getting noticeably worse with a drop in talent and play calling. Where does that put this defense in terms of a ranking?
Well, they still got a solid talent level, but they're less flexible, and we've now got an unproven coordinator. So the market currently has this defense top 3, but I'd be pretty surprised if they finish top 3 in the NFL this season.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting to watch how that shakes out, but let's shift it over to our next team. We've got the Cincinnati Bengals coming off of that 9-8 season, and this is a team we were low on coming into last year. I mean, they had a tough start as they were just 1-3, but they battled back to 5-4, and there was hope until Joe Burrow would get that season-ending injury in that Week 11 game. Then they would end up missing the playoffs, but now Burrow's back, and their 2024 win total is set at 10.5.
Yeah, and I mean, last year it was pretty much a lost year. We talked about lost years with the Jets and the Giants previews already, but this was pretty much a lost year for the Bengals with Joe Burrow clearly hampered by the injury and then ultimately missing the stretch run of the season. So I think, let's just level set again. Let's look at what this offense was rated going into last year. The market had them ranked 6th. And now they've added Trent Brown, who's clearly an upgrade over Jonah Williams at tackle. And I think Mike Gesicki can give you a lot of that between the numbers work they're losing with Tyler Boyd now in Tennessee.
Yeah, that departure of Boyd opens up a lot more slot work for Jamar Chase, who should be getting an absolutely massive amount of targets this season. And I know some have dropped their expectations for Burrow because he wasn't at the top of minds last January, but the betting markets have not dropped expectations. I mean, this is a big boy offense projected to score the 6th most points in the league, sandwiched between the Ravens and the Bills.
Yeah, and I think they're clearly better than Ravens based on the points we talked about in the last segment. And I also think they're pretty clearly better than the Bills, even if you have Josh Allen as a better quarterback than Burrow, which I do. You just look at it everywhere else, though. I mean, the Bengals definitely have better receivers. The Bengals' offensive line is stronger than Buffalo's as well. And I think Zach Taylor and Joe Brady are basically a wash at play caller. So you look at it, that all nets out to, if you think the Bengals are better than the Ravens and Bills on offense, that means this is a top 5 offense heading into 2024.
All right, well, let's shift it over to the defense where things are not as optimistic, but looking at last year, the Bengals let safeties Jesse Bates and Von Bell walk, and the defense fell off a cliff. I mean, the Bengals defense was just 27th in EPA per play in 2023.
Yeah. It was so bad they decided to bring Von Bell back at safety, and then they signed Geno Stone, who ranked 8th in PFF coverage grade among safeties last year in Baltimore. However, they lose DJ Reader. They tried to patch up that interior by bringing in Sheldon Rankins and drafting Chris Jenkins in the second round, but I'm not optimistic those guys are going to be able to replace the production that they were getting from DJ Reader.
Yeah, and they also lose Chidobe Awuzie, and they didn't bring anyone else at cornerback, so it looks like they'll be counting on DJ Turner to make a leap because he was getting absolutely cooked last year.
Yeah, and their other top pick in the 2023 draft, Miles Murphy, finished his rookie season averaging less than a pressure per game. So, I mean, Murphy and Turner stepping up is really the path for this defense finishing above average. Because the two safety additions are basically just canceling out the production they lost from DJ Reader, who's been a rock on this interior defensive line in the entire Joe Burrow era. So, I mean, we're kind of used to Lou Anarumo defenses, being better than average, but they're going to need the young guys to step up in 2024.
All right, well, let's shift it over to our next team. We've got the Cleveland Browns coming off of a wild 11-6 season in which they started 5 different quarterbacks, but they were 7-4 when they turned to Joe Flacco as their starting QB, and he would win 4 or 5 games to lock them into the 5 seed, and then they rested their starters in that Week 18 game, but I don't think the rest really helped as they got whomped 45-14 by the Texans in the wild card round. So now you've got Deshaun Watson. He is back, and their 2024 win total is set at just 8.5.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we have to start with the quarterback when talking about the Browns here, because the range of opinions on Deshaun Watson heading into this season is wild. So, I mean, let's go back to last year. You look at it, Joe Flacco gave them negative 0.07 EPA per play down the stretch. The betting market had the offense ranked 24th with Flacco under center.
Yeah, so not that great. And I think the Flacco mania really stemmed from him just looking so much better than PJ Walker and DTR.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to note that Deshaun's 2 years in Cleveland thus far, people have been so down on Deshaun Watson, but he's been negative 0.04 EPA per play. So that's 1.1 points per game better than what Flacco gave them down the stretch. And that would put the offense at around 20th in market as a floor if Watson doesn't get any better than he has been in his first couple of years with the Browns.
Yeah, I mean, he's only played 12 football games in the last 3 seasons, but he has the talent.
Yeah. I mean, Watson averaged plus 0.18 EPA per play in Houston. So that's 8.8 points per game better than what Flacco gave them down the stretch. And you look at it in the betting market, Watson's offense finished 10th, 8th, and 15th his final 3 seasons in Houston. And we love the addition of offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey, who specializes in the spread, which I think the Browns are going to run a ton more of just due to the uncertainty with Nick Chubb. So you bring in Ken Dorsey along with Kevin Stefanski, who we also like as a play caller. I love this coaching staff for Deshaun Watson.
So we like the coaching staff, and Deshaun's supporting cast is looking really solid.
Yeah. I mean, it's an elite offensive line, right? You got the 2 Pro Bowl guards, right tackle Jack Conklin coming back after only 22 snaps last season. Remember, he ranked 4th in pass blocking efficiency in 2022. And then you look at the receivers. Amari Cooper, 13th in yards per route run last year. David Njoku, 6th in yards per route run among tight ends. And they add Jerry Jeudy, who I think is a little bit underrated now because Russell Wilson doesn't like to throw between the numbers, which is where Jerry Jeudy excels, right? So he had a bad year last year, but if you look at it in 2022, Jerry Jeudy was one of the league's best slot receivers, ranking 5th in yards per route run. So I think the Browns got a distressed asset there. Jerry Jeudy, we already know, had the great draft capital, and I think he'll be a great second option behind Amari Cooper.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, let's shift it over to the other side of the ball, where the Browns defense brought in defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz and rated 2nd in the betting markets by the end of the season. And this was led by Myles Garrett and the best cornerback trio in the NFL.
Yeah, and they're not going to really be changing too much heading into 2024, given the success they had last year. They a little bit of a shakeup at off-ball linebacker. Anthony Walker and Sion Takitaki are out the door. They bring in Devin Bush and Jordan Hicks, who has some of that familiarity in the Jim Schwartz defense during his time with the Eagles. They also bring in a few more bodies on the defensive line, drafting Mike Hall and adding Quentin Jefferson, who's he can get you 2 pressures per game on the interior. That's another body to add to this dangerous Browns pass rush.
Yeah, I think there still might be some question marks for how this single high approach will work against Shanahan or McVay style offenses in the playoffs. But you have to think, this is going to be a top 3 regular season defense.
Yeah, I think so. It's hard for me to not see that happening again. So putting it all together, I really don't think the Browns overall are much worse than the Bengals and Ravens. Now, Cincinnati has a soft schedule this year, but my bold prediction is Cleveland will finish with a better record than Baltimore in 2024.
I like that little bit of a hot take. Well, let's shift it over to our next team. We've got the Pittsburgh Steelers coming off of that 10-7 season, and Mike Tomlin kept a 17-year non-losing streak alive as his team won 3 straight games to end the year and to sneak into the playoffs as the 7th seed, but they were quickly sent home by the Bills. But this might have felt like the ugliest 10th season of all time, but now they've got some new QBs in the building with a 2024 win total set at just 8.5.
Yeah, Pittsburgh was a playoff fraud. They were just the 5th team in history to win 10 games with a point differential of -20 or worse. And you mentioned the 2 new quarterbacks. We think Russell Wilson is likely the favorite to win the job. They also brought in Justin Fields, but I'm not sure they're going to be an upgrade over what the Steelers were getting last year at quarterback in that trio of Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, Mitch Trubisky. So the Steelers quarterbacks last year averaged 5.8 yards per pass play. Russell Wilson in his 2 seasons with Denver averaged 5.8 yards per pass play. So I really just do not think they're upgrading under center heading into 2024.
All right, well, what do you think about the new play caller, Arthur Smith? He certainly has to be an upgrade from Matt Canada and Mike Sullivan, right?
Yeah, it is an upgrade, but maybe not the perfect marriage because Justin Fields and Russell Wilson have a hard time throwing over the middle of the field, which is where we see that Arthur Smith offense work when they're humming, right? You remember that last year Arthur Smith was in Tennessee. A.J. Brown ranked 3rd in yards per route run based on all those play action over routes. And I don't know that, Russ or Justin Fields are going to be able to hit those this season. I do think Arthur Smith's run game is going to work this season.
So you don't think starting 2 rookies on the O-line is going to be a problem here?
Well, both Zach Frazier and Troy Fontenot are athletic and should be great in this zone blocking scheme. Usually rookies struggle more in pass protection, but I honestly don't think they're going to be a downgrade there either, especially since they'll likely be protected by play action more than most rookies coming into the NFL. And the reason I don't think they're going to be a downgrade is because Frazier's replacing Mason Cole, who is 5th worst in pass blocking efficiency among centers last year. And then Fontenot is replacing Dan Moore at tackle, who was surrendering a league high 10.8% pressure rate. So as long as Fontenot isn't the worst pass blocking tackle in the league, that's going to be an upgrade for the Steelers.
Yeah, well, this receiving core loses one of the league's best route runners in Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, I think the passing game is mostly going to be built by getting defenses into single high looks and then hitting guys like Calvin Austin and George Pickens down the field, hunting those deep play action shots because they don't have Deontay Johnson anymore that can win in that intermediate range.
Well, it feels like this defense is near the top of the league every year, but are there any changes we should expect for 2024?
I really don't think so. They're going to be great versus the run again. They had Patrick Queen to a defense that already finished 5th in rush success rate allowed in 2023. And in the pass defense, they'll continue to use those cover 3 looks that they ran at the 2nd highest rate in the NFL. And they love the blitz packages in Pittsburgh as well. They call blitzes at the 6th highest rate last season.
Yeah, this pass rush looks like it could be the best in the league, headlined by TJ Watt, who led the NFL with 19 sacks last year.
Yeah, and on the other side, Alex Highsmith with 13th in pressures. Now, interior defender Cameron Hayward didn't look right last season after undergoing groin surgery in September. He averaged just 1.7 pressures per game after coming back in week 9 compared to averaging 3.4 pressures per game in 2022.
Yeah, but you have to think he's going to be better not having to battle with the groin. And Keanu Benton is poised for a breakout on that interior next to Hayward. So not much has changed on the back end either, except for swapping Patrick Peterson with Dante Jackson.
Yeah, and that's basically a wash at second cornerback. And you'd expect Joey Porter to be even better in year 2 at the other cornerback position. So this is looking like a top 10 defense again, despite all of the changes on offense. That basically means this is going to be the same team we always see, right? The Steelers are the Steelers under Mike Tomlin. They're going to get slightly better than replacement level quarterback play. They're going to try and muck games up and win games with their top 10 defense. So overall, that nets out to about a power rating about half point worse than average, which is where this team has basically been in market for years.
Yeah, and with that power rating and facing the toughest schedule in the NFL, it could be setting up for Mike Tomlin's first losing season. But let's shift it over here to our next segment. We've got the fantasy corner, and who are you looking to target in this division?
I'm going to go with Amari Cooper, who's currently going wide receiver 28 in Best Ball Mania on Underdog. And the betting market has the Browns projected to score exactly the same amount of points as the Seahawks. Yet DK Metcalf, their top pass catcher, is going wide receiver 19 in Best Ball Mania. The Browns are projected to score 10 more points this season than the Buccaneers, yet Mike Evans is wide receiver 17th on Underdog. I do not see why Amari Cooper is not in the mix with those guys, especially for the reasons we talked about earlier in the podcast. I think Cleveland's offense is going to be better than they're expected to be in market. Amari has gotten 260 targets the last 2 seasons with Cleveland. He's clearly the top dog on a better than average offense that wants to pass the ball this year while Nick Chubb works back from injury.
Yeah, and to add to your point, I mean, Amari, he ran cold last year. I mean, he had a career low 5 TDs, which you have to think is going to go up. But our last segment here, we've got a bet for the people. And what do you got for us, Tan?
All right. AFC North Futures bet. I'm going with Joe Burrow plus 850 to lead the NFL in passing yards. We talked about how we're not convinced the Bengals solved all their defensive problems earlier in the podcast. So I think this team is going to be in a ton of shootouts. Cincinnati led the NFL in pass rate over expectation last year, despite backup Jake Browning getting 7 starts and Burrow clearly not himself. So now they've let Joe Mixon walk. Burrow's healthy again with something to prove, and he should be the favorite in my eyes to lead the NFL in pass attempts. The Bengals are going to put all their chips on the table this season, knowing this is possibly their last run with T. Higgins. They've upgraded the offensive line, swapping out Jonah Williams for Trent Brown. So this might end up being Joe Burrow's best supporting cast of his entire career because his cap hit will basically be $50 million from 2025 onward.
I love that pick. I think this team is poised for a lot of shootouts, but that will do it for this week's episode. We will be back next Friday to preview the NFC South. And don't forget to check out drbobsports.com, where we've got the NFL and college football packages, as well as the weekly free analysis. So as always, thanks for watching and make sure to like and subscribe.